this episode, we've got Dr. Sean Francis, and just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing now, and then we're going to dive into some of the things that you've done recently and get into that stuff.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me on. So I'm a chiropractor at Tower Hill Chiropractic here in Peterborough. My wife is also a chiropractor, so together we own that clinic as well as Kawartha Lakes Chiropractic in Lindsay. In Lindsay, we also run Kawartha Lakes Fit Body, which is an indoor fitness boot camp. We've run that for the last 9 years. And I've been a member of the Canadian Forces Army Reserve since 1998, so coming up on 22 years now.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of things going on, and I definitely want to cycle back into that in a bit and see how you balance all of that stuff, because we usually like to end the conversations with a little more advice, sometimes tailored towards whether it's a new business owner or somebody that's just trying to like get into their zone, right? Find their flow.
Sure.
And so we'll definitely circle back to that, but you just competed in something called the Iron Warrior, and I really wanted to focus a lot on that today because it sounds amazing, and you really did an exceptional performance this year, especially if you look back on previous years. So what is the Iron Warrior? Who's able to take part in it, and how did you like prepare for it this year, and how did you do?
Yeah. Okay. So the Canadian Forces Iron Warrior is an annual event. I believe this was the 36th or 37th year they've run it. And it's sort of the Canadian version of the Iron Man. Some might say, even though it's shorter distance, it's definitely more grueling. The event itself, 500 soldiers up at Canadian Forces Base Petawawa over 2 days take part. And it's a 50-kilometer event. So you start at 4 in the morning. You've got a 40-pound backpack, minimum weight, plus your food and water and any other gear that you think that you would need. And you've got a 32-kilometer march ahead of you. So this is in the dark because the sun's not coming up for the next few hours. And you step off with this group, and each day is about 250 to 280. It's certainly grown in the last few years. So 32 kilometers with this backpack. So mine was about 48 pounds with water. I had 3.5 liters on me, plus nutrients within the water itself. At that point, for having completed the 32 kilometers, you're then awarded a 50-pound canoe, which you prepare the day before, and you will single-handedly portage that canoe for about 4 kilometers. That'll take you to the Ottawa River, at which point you then place your kit in the canoe, you enter the Ottawa River, and you've got an 8-kilometer paddle ahead of you. You finish that then, and remembering you've just completed 36 kilometers of marching with weight on your back or running, carried, and then you got on the water and paddled, so your legs have now tightened up quite a bit over the last hour. You still have 6 kilometers to go. So you put your pack back on, and you race to the finish line, hoping to do your best.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely a grueling event. Rain or shine, it doesn't really matter the weather. So this is my 3rd year doing it. I first started 2 years ago. I had the idea probably 15 years ago with my old unit to do this event. I heard about it and I wanted to try it out, and it sounded interesting. It didn't happen at that time.
Yeah.
So about 3 years ago, our now commanding officer of the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment, Major Vanderberg, mentioned this was one of the things that we were required to do to have people involved in the Iron Warrior competition. And it reminded me about the event, and I thought, you know what, this is something I want to do. So I was, at that time, 2 years ago, I was just finishing a 16-week fitness program, sort of getting in great shape for the summer. And I woke up on my birthday, the 29th, and I said, I'm going to put a backpack on and go for a bit of a walk, just to get the feel.
Yeah.
And I think that was the catalyst. I said, I'm making it happen. So that summer, a friend of mine, Nicholas LeBlanc, who's also in the unit, we trained over 500 kilometers. From June, July, and August. We went out, we did the event, and my first time ever, I had finished in 6 hours, 53 minutes, placing me 8th out of almost 200 soldiers.
Wow.
So that was pretty incredible. And we took off, we were out the gate, we were moving fast, and over time, I found myself in the lead. I was all alone on my first year doing it, but improper, I think it was the nutrition and maybe several other things we can talk about that caught up with me. I slowed down, I cramped, people passed me, I was counting them. I had this sort of sense of defeat, like, oh no, I don't know what I really expected that year. I really just wanted to complete it and do very well, but ended up in 8th, so that was good. Fast forward a year, And we're going to do it again. So now I'm unfortunately Nick couldn't do it that year. So I found some of the other lads from the unit that they were gonna do it with me. I didn't get to train as much. In May, I was away for 5 weeks up at Base Meaford doing my infantry junior leadership course. So 5 weeks away from family and business and everything else like that. And thank goodness I've got a very powerful wife and a very strong wife who was able to keep everything going. Right, we have 3 kids and the whole household.
Yeah.
But trained not as much. So I did that, and then I got back, and a few weeks later we had our 3rd child. So even less training, because where I would get up in the morning before, I couldn't. I was quite exhausted all the time taking care of baby, and now sort of Stacy was off for 3 months, so I'm running all the businesses. But regardless, I said, you know what, I'm committed, I'm going to go do this. So I ended up putting in 200 kilometers of training. That includes sort of the event itself, so about 150, and then went and did the event. And what's interesting is I was faster.
Oh.
I went from 6:53 to 6:41, shaved 12 minutes off, came 9th place, which is a place slower, which means it was a better playing field, right? Better athletes out there. And I was still quite impressed with what I achieved. And I had turned my eyes now to the next year. And I thought, okay, well, let's really make this happen. So now we're in this year.
Yeah.
This year was interesting because it was back in June that I put on the pack, and I wanted to get ready to start training, so went out and did a simple 5 kilometer with the backpack on, and it was quite quick. It's interesting because I move fast for a 39-year-old, and the young guys in the unit will tell you this. They're surprised how I move as fast as they do with 50 pounds on my back, often much faster than they do with 0 weight on their back. So it's an interesting thing there, and maybe it's just a resilience. Who knows what it is? But anyway, so I started the training here in July. I believe it was July, June or July, I think it was July. We did this thing. Our Regimental Sergeant Major, Dean Stokes, he had the idea that we were going to, because I believe it's July 10 is Pacino Day, which is one of the great battles of the Second World War that the Hastings Prince Edward Regiment was involved in. And we talk about the hundreds of miles these soldiers traveled in that war and for what we have today. So it was in homage to that. And we said, we're going to do this event where we walk over 2 days, 100 miles. The hundreds and hundreds of miles they did, we were going to do 100 miles. It was a test of unit strength and cohesion and individual skill. So on Monday, we stepped off from Coburg Armories, I believe around 4 or 5 in the morning, and we ended up in Peterborough that night, having done 50 miles or 60 kilometers. The next morning, we got up and we went from Peterborough to Belleville. Crossed the line, and you were allowed to take breaks as need be and sort of sub in and sub out. But I logged over that 160 possible kilometers, 101 kilometers over 2 days.
Yeah.
Which was incredible. We were fighting the heat, and it was hot. We were dehydrated. It was a great accomplishment, and it was very interesting to be able to do something like that, because I think that set the tone for this year. And as mangled as maybe my feet were and my body over that arduous task, it toughened the feet, it toughened the frame, it toughened me. So any training going forth was almost whatever. I've done 101K. So I got into the point where it's now time to get up and go do 16 kilometers of hills with Dave Curvin from Trent Health and Motion there. And it was like, okay, well, whatever. It's not 101, it's 16.
Yeah.
So we would do hills, and the next week it was 24, and then it was 16 on a track, and we set up the loop that we were actually going to do, because we ran the full Ironman 3 weeks prior to the event, because we wanted to know, and I had done it before, I wanted the new guys to know what it felt like.
Yeah.
So it wasn't new on the day. They were prepared. And we bumped our training up, and we went 24 kilometers of hills. We did heavy carries. And then ultimately we got to the event. I mean, there was a lot more involved in nutrition, and we can talk about the nutrition and the mindset and the flow state and what I was doing here with the cold therapy and the float therapy and the massage and the fascial release. But it was really an all-encompassing year that put it all together. Long story short, we ran the event last Thursday, stepped off at 4 within a kilometer. I was at the front with a couple people that I knew were big contenders. By 4 kilometers, I started pulling away. I stopped briefly at 8 kilometers because I had to take a quick pee, and looked back. I saw my second place guy a couple hundred meters back, took off again. I got to the 8 kilometers. Again, a quick stop, nobody in sight, got to the 32. In years past, I told myself that, you know what, if I can win the 32, the initial element, I might win the event. And this really started to come back to me, because I'm saying, okay, well, is this true? They gave me the canoe, put it on my back, started walking, instantly remind me of how exhausted I was because of the run. The 32 kilometers itself, where I expected 3:44 to be my time, I did it in 3:02. So I was literally on fire moving. The canoe, I didn't want to put it down, but I did after about 3.5 kilometers, about 3 and a bit kilometers, put it down for a break, picked it up, didn't do much, got to the next stand. There's basically tents out there you can lean it on. Took a little bit of a longer break, but I said to myself, I don't want to lose this event because I'm taking breaks. So pick it up and go. And I picked it up and started running with it because I was not going to lose at this point. I was so committed to winning the event. Hit the water. Couldn't see anything. It was all foggy out, so we're listening to the boats. And just as I pulled away, number 2 hit the water. I heard him barreling in behind me on the beach. So he was there, and he was on my heels. Game plan changed. I was thinking about, drinking every 5 minutes. I just paddled. I went into total zone, paddled. Every stroke counted. And an hour 9 later, exited the water, cheering people, bagpipes going on. Picked up my pack, and normally in years past where I would be exhausted and the legs would be seized, I just moved. I picked it up and moved, and I was through the golf course. Moments later, my wife and kids arrived because I told them that when I would be there getting out of the water, not expecting to move as fast, they got there, asked if I was out, and the response they got was, "Oh yeah, he's on the move, total beast mode." So my son was a little let down because he had to walk back up this massive hill. But they went back up. I carried on through the personal quarters. Final 2 kilometers, I was really feeling it. Started looking over my shoulder, just, oh man, is this guy going to get me? Turned onto the final 100-meter stretch, saw my wife, ran to her. I said, "Is there anyone near me?" She looks back, she goes, "Not a person." Went forward, got my brigade flag. Kept moving forward, got my regimental flag. Beast mode was re-engaged. The kids joined me. We crushed the line. 5 hours, 39 minutes, an hour or 2 faster than last year.
Yeah.
So that's the event. I won the day. I was 11 minutes faster than the next fellow.
Yeah.
And wow, what an experience. So that's it.
Yeah.
That's the last 3 years.
That's amazing. I think something that I really like out of that is you talked about the training leading up to it being as tough and tougher than the competition day in a lot of ways, so that when you put all the pieces together on competition day, you are firing on all cylinders. And it's the exact same thing that I've realized over the past 8 years of competing in strongman, is like you kind of get better and better and learn like these subtle things. The training, making it harder than the competition, doing multiple sets of what you're going to do on competition day, and sometimes with less ideal environment. So whether it's like a tougher terrain, tougher equipment, earlier in the morning, different things to throw the body off, but then dialing it into being as close as possible to competition day is critical to performing at the absolute best. And we see that, across the board with athletes that are really at the peak of what they're doing. So that's super cool to hear. And I think it sounds like you've got a very competitive background too, though. And so you get fired up just from the competition spirit and competition environment. I believe you've done some bodybuilding shows or something in the past, have you? Yeah,
I've done fitness male model, fitness physique. So not the super massive guys,
yeah,
but just a demonstration of health and can I be lean and can be a fit and aesthetic, and I love it. And I like what you're saying about training harder. And there's a great quote that says, "Your toughest day should never be in combat." Right? If you have to figure things out when bullets are flying, it's a bad show. And I love that, because that's how the Navy SEALs and a lot of the special forces around the world train, is they train so that they already expect it. There's nothing more that they can see on that battlefield that they're not prepared for. And I think that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about what the other quote is, proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's so just being prepared.
Totally.
Because it's a mental toughness. There's certainly the physiology of training, but it's the mind that often fails people. Mm-hmm. So if your mind has been there before, it'll go there again. And that's why I think that 101 kilometers was one of the cornerstones of what happened this year.
Yeah.
Because to say, I'm going to get up tomorrow and do 24 kilometers, the average human being is probably terrified of that statement, saying, I could never, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it was just get up and just move. Because It's not 101, so big deal. Mm-hmm. And off we went.
And you were doing it at 4 or 5 a.m. right?
That was the interesting thing, yeah. So as there's 2 days of competition. Day one is the non-lodger unit. So everybody external to the base, the reservists, people who have full-time jobs, right? Citizen, soldiers. I work at the clinics, I work at the gym, I run a family, and then I do my Tuesday and Thursday nights training with the Hastings Prince Edward Regiment, plus weekends, plus any training that I can do. So this means getting up at 3 so I can go out at 4 and I can train till 7 and come home and get the kids ready for school and then open the clinic at 9 o'clock and go.
Yeah.
So pretty incredible there, because I look back on the timings, and on day 2, that's when the regular force goes. That's when the lodger unit, so the full-timers, the guys who train year-round, who get paid, maybe not the same responsibilities as I have. Mm-hmm. So when I look at it on day 2 this year, the first place guy was, I believe, just under 5:38. So he was a minute 13 faster than me. And for a second, I was like, man, I got it. 2 things happened. One, I thought, dang, maybe I shouldn't have taken as much breaks on the portage. And I said, okay, well, wait a second. This guy gets all the training in the world. But then I said, okay, well, there's room for improvement.
Yeah.
Now I got to come back.
Right.
And I think the fastest time I've seen on that course is 5:26. So I've got 13 minutes to find. And it's there and it's doable. It's just when it's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And so, like, what do you think has led up to like the mental toughness to get through that? Or is it a lot of, you kind of talked about being in the zone with it. Is there something that you kind of identify with where you recognize that flow state where it's like you lose track of time, you are really, your body's just firing on all cylinders? Is there something in your life where that's kind of like the core element? Is it with like this sort of running stuff, or where does that come from?
Yeah, I think probably the first time I experienced something I didn't even know was flow state would be 2006. I was with the Canadian Forces Army gun race team. We traveled across Canada doing demonstrations, and essentially it was 2 teams. And we took a pack howitzer, we pulled it apart, disintegrated this big cannon, pulled it apart, ran pieces up the ramp, hooked it onto this guy wire, went across this this pseudo canyon, not really a canyon there, but across this gap, unhooked. And I was the guy on the far side catching these pieces of metal, these 90 to 300 pound pieces of metal, and rolling through so it could be put back together, reassemble the gun, fire, and that's the winning team. And we got down to doing this in like a minute's time.
Oh, wow.
And the flow and precision you need to be in there when you're not even thinking about it, because, you've got a 209 pound trail coming at you, and the guy, and you're looking him at the eyes, and he has to hit the ejector right at the right time, because if he slams into the end buckle, this 10-foot piece of metal is flying up in the air and someone's going to get smoked. He ejects it, it sails in, I'm standing there ready to catch it, and I'm on the go.
Yeah.
So I would listen to, back at that time, Tool had just come out with 10,000 Days, and that The Pot was my song, right? And I would listen to it, and I would just get fired up, and I knew it, and I knew my spot. And I watched back old videos, and they're on the YouTube under Canadian Forces Army Gun Race Team, and I would see myself get across, and I'm tapping the pole. I'm always checking my position. I know where I'm at, and it was seamless execution. Didn't even think about it. And then it was years later in Toronto doing a CrossFit run weightlifting course where I heard about this concept of flow and started looking more into flow and sort of this execution and autopilot. So in preparation for this event, one of the things I did as far as mental mindset was the idea of flow, and it was the app Headspace. So they had a competition series. It was 10 segments. You could choose 10 or 15 minutes. And I've used Headspace in the past. So this one here, it gets you thinking about breathing, slowing down, mindfulness. But then it takes you through determining a visual or kinesthetic cue that you can relate to flow state and very quickly re-enter it. So in past, I had used a contact of first digit and middle finger to help me control anxiety and blood pressure and stress and enter into sleep a lot faster. So this I chose, something, because my scenery was changing on the run. I chose first and second digit. So I sat there and I would make that contact and I'd focus on how my body felt, and I would think about the gun race team and how seamless things were. And I did this over a period of 10 sessions in lead up to the race. So when I got out there and running and my mind is drifting, 6 hours of running alone and staring off into the darkness, and you start thinking about whatever, the body and the aches and all that. And I found I could quickly make that connection and I would get back into focusing on what I'm doing. So the execution, or every stride, or my gait pattern, or every row was purposeful and with intent and with the best that I had to offer. So I wasn't just out there aimlessly. I had focus, and I think that helped me. And if it's flow, or if it's, operant conditioning, or whatever it was, it worked.
Wow.
Because that was just one element of what allowed me to execute what I needed to.
Yeah. It seems like every week I learn something new about the different strategies that people are using to either get into flow or recognize it. And that's super cool. I've never really heard of that, and I'll have to check out that course on Headspace, because it's definitely a great app for learning meditation. But that sounds like a pretty neat kind of biohack, or whatever, if you will, of expanding the realm of part of the purpose of mindfulness too, right? So it's being able to get yourself out of that state of discomfort even, right? And I was thinking about it, because like a lot of the times flow comes with things that aren't always the most comfortable, and the only way you can kind of balance that fine line and not have that distraction of pain and discomfort is if you are in like a very mindful state as well, even though it becomes very unconscious. Like you said with the gun race, it's everything's got to be essentially working on autopilot, and that's where all the training leading up to it really is critical to being able to execute and perform in a deep flow state, kind of at your very pinnacle of performance, right?
For sure.
That's super cool. So yeah, I didn't think that I would hear something like that, and that's great. I think that, with the take-home points that we like to have, that's something I definitely encourage people to check out and look more into. Kind of, I guess, actually something we didn't really touch on with the race and everything, and you said led to perhaps a better performance from the past years, is figuring out the nutrition strategy and the hydration strategy. And so what did you do differently from last year that kind of helped you with that aspect?
Yeah, so this year I sort of really looked at science of nutrition, what the body is able to store as far as glycogen, stored glucose or energy form, what the body needed for hydration. And it's very tricky because everything you pull offline as far as preparation for Ironman, well, this isn't Ironman. This is something very different. So Ironman, as long as it is, they're not carrying a 40 to 50 pound pack. They're not in combat boots, combat pants, sweating profusely. And I mean, humidity was 100%. Now, we lucked out the day of. It was about 6 or 7 degrees. It was cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't overheat like I've done in past, where you're just constantly sweating. So I sat down, researched as much as I could, and basically came up with the calculations of what I needed. That 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, that 500 to 700 mils of water per hour. What can the human consume and utilize based on what we know from research and physiology? And then I said, okay, well, how long is it going to take me for each event? So the run is going to take me, I guess, 3.5 hours. The portage an hour. I have 4.5 hours. I'm carrying a 3.5 liter bladder. So what does that mean as far as carbs within? I'm out 4.5 hours, so I need 9, 18, 36. I need over 400 grams of carbs. Well, where can I get that carbs? And whereas last year I haphazardly placed several scoops of a nutrition supplement, basically a glucose, carbohydrate, dextrose, some salt. This year I actually calculated and said, okay, I need 10 scoops. I don't want to go much more than beyond that. So where else can I get sugar? Concentrated juice, a whole can. And I figured that out. It says, okay, when I have what I need, now what's the schedule? Because I need 90 grams every 60 minutes. And I kept it at the high end because I figured I'm sweating a lot more. I'm doing something more sort of physically demanding over a short time, especially if I want to keep a pace under 7 minutes per kilometer, which ended up being under 6 minutes kilometer with the speed that I was going.
Yeah.
What is my consumption rate? I don't want to wait every 20 minutes because I'm going to have to take in, 250 mils of water. And that's too much. That's sloshing. What about every 5 minutes? So I calculated and said, okay, every 5 minutes makes sense. I need to take in about 70 mils of water, 60 to 70 mils of water. So how do I do that? Well, what's my current draw rate? So I put the Camel back on and I said, when I take a mouthful versus a front mouth sip, how much does that equate to, and spit it out into a cup and said, okay, it's 30 mils front mouth, 60 mils full mouth. So I can either go full mouth or 2 front mouth. What does that equal on carbohydrate intake? 3.5 grams of carbs per front mouth, or full mouth would be 7 grams of carbs. If I do it every 5 minutes, it gives me 28 grams of carbs. There's my carbohydrate intake. So I'm good to go. There's my water intake. So I prepared that. I knew that the second half of the race was going to be challenging. I'd be a little fatigued. So I opted for a different supplement that had more caffeine in it. Oh, yeah. And I did the same math. I'm going to be an hour on the water, an hour running after the water. How much water do I need to bring with me? I've got a 2.5 liter Camelback, but I only need 1.5 liters. I don't want extra weight, so let's only do 1.5 liters. How many scoops does that equate to? What does my energy on the day look like? In years past, I would get up early and eat oatmeal or whatever, simple things. And that's what's suggested, but I didn't want anything in my stomach. I didn't want to be digesting food. Okay. I wanted liquid forms, fast energy, and go. So I took that into consideration. Last year, the day before, I sort of followed a regimented nutrition. I carb loaded the day before with things like rice and bread and bananas and whatnot, pastas and chicken. But again, the science wasn't there. It was sort of haphazard. So I sat down and I said, okay, well, what do I need? I need to get up to 4 to 6, even 6 to 800 grams of carbohydrates in the 2 days before. Mm-hmm. So how can I do that? And I had been following a plan all summer long to stay very, very lean, which in turn made me very adaptive to carbohydrate consumption. Sure. So on the daily basis, I was consuming about 80 grams of carbohydrates strictly from vegetables. Very low amount.
Yeah.
I understand through coaching and through our fitness programs that really, unless we're, full tilt athletes or there's competition, we just don't need as much of that carbohydrate as we believe that we need. And I find under half your body weight in grams per day is sufficient for most people. So, at 180 pounds, 185 pounds, 90 grams is suffice for me. It's good. I get most of my nutrients from proteins and from healthy fats.
Yeah.
And that was me. So the good thing is I was very responsive to carbohydrate intake, the way the pancreas and insulin works. I was controlling that sugar. It was utilized very rapidly, not stored as excess energy. But I couldn't go from 80 up to 800 because my body would crash. Mm-hmm. So I'm in and around the 1,700 calories per day, which is in line with the 9 calories per pound of body weight, which is what I felt that I needed at the time. And I started ramping it up. And I said, based on my daily intake, which is consistent over the last probably 8 weeks, things like egg whites and all natural peanut butter and vegetables and chicken and fish and turkey, the simplistic whole healthy foods. And I was consistent. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to start to take away little bits of fat here and start to add carbohydrates. So I went from Saturday having 80 some odd grams of carbs up to 120 on Sunday. My calories went up 100. No big deal. Yeah. Monday, I added more. I started adding bananas and oatmeals and rices. And I went from 120 up to almost 200 grams of carbohydrates, and my calories went from 2,000 up to 2,200, very small increments. As I got into Tuesday, I bumped up now to almost 3,000. There was a big jump in calories, less fats, more carbohydrates, to the point where I was now almost to a third of my intake as carbohydrates, and I was up into the 200 to 300. The day before the event, I had built myself up to 600 grams of carbohydrates through lots of rice, lots of bananas, RX bars, these little honey snap thing bars, and drinking the supplement drink that I'd be drinking the next day. So my calories were up into the 3,000s. And the day of the event with the nutrition schedule, and I just figured this out last night because I looked at my run tracker, and in that 50 kilometers, in that 5 hours, 39 minutes, it estimates I burned 4,200 calories. When I look back at my nutrition plan, the nutrition from midnight to end of race was 4,150 calories. It was ridiculous how that added up.
Yeah.
And I think it was that fueled me, because in past years, at 12 to 16, even 18 kilometers, I would cramp. I'd be in the lead, but I would cramp. My legs would seize up. I'd be hitting my legs. And from there on, it was a game of walking and running to try to get through the event. This didn't happen this year. I just kept moving. And whenever I thought, maybe I'm going to walk, I said, not till you get your canoe. And I just kept going. And the nutrition, I also had that sort of statement, the if, when, then statement, right? So if or when this happens, then this will occur. So I said, when I'm on flat ground or going downhill, I will run. When I'm going uphill, I will walk fast. And when I found myself at times where I was walking on flat ground and I thought about walking, I said, well, no, that's not the condition. The condition is when you're on flat ground, you will run.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple thing. And there's great research on that too, on how effective a simple statement is.
Yeah.
When lunch is over, I will opt for the spearmint tea and not the big piece of ice cream cake.
Yeah.
And people react to that because they have a statement. When I wake up and brush my teeth, I will take my diabetic medicine. And people are more likely to do it almost threefold than those who don't have a statement to guide them.
Yeah.
So very cool.
That's a great piece of advice. Yeah, that's we talk about things like affirmations and these sort of subtle tricks that you can use in your speech, essentially, in your thought process and your speech. I don't think we've actually gotten into the if, when, then, though. So that's a great piece of advice to just, have everybody mull over and consider how you can apply that, whether it is for a race or if it's for any other type of habit you're trying to build or just thing you're trying to accomplish, right? So that I really like that piece of advice. Now, we kind of started with hearing about all the different things that you've got going on in your life, and I'm fascinated to know, like, how are you finding balance with all of that? Running a clinic in Peterborough, in Lindsay, running the boot camp gym in Lindsay, running a family, and all the physical stuff. Like, you're telling me you're right after this, you're going to the gym, and how do you manage it all? What are some of the things like you've learned over the years of doing this that are like kind of those key components?
I think definitely time management is important. We can have every excuse in the world, but excuses don't take you closer to your destination. So why, right? Yeah. I follow a very interesting guy out of Toronto, Ontario. His name's Craig Ballantyne. He wrote a book called The Perfect Day Formula. And he talks about the perfect day doesn't occur the day of by chance. It occurs the night before through preparation and planning. Get your mind right at night before, write out what you have to do. What are your big rocks? Where does your attention and focus need to be? What do you need to attack first to move you forward in your day? What time can you get up? Do you need to sleep in till 6 and 7 o'clock? Can you go to bed earlier? Because what's the point of sitting up all night watching things that aren't going to, move your life forward? Can you get up earlier, and can you get that focused time where almost it's a 3-to-1 ratio of how effective you are? So if you can get up at 5 a.m. and get an hour or two of work done before the family gets up and the world gets up and imposes their issues upon you, you can put that time into your development and your lifestyle development, whether it's business or personal life. Are you going to work out? Because at the end of the day, we find a million excuses why we don't want to go work out or exercise or better ourselves. So I think just having that plan, having that focus, understanding what you want to achieve, and then dialing it back. So we look at mission statements in the military. What do we want to achieve, or time estimations, and we work back and we figure out, well, what's it going to take to achieve this end state? Not taking step by step and then trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
Which is a challenging thing too, because there's a philosophy that basically the idea of ready, fire, aim. Take action and correct en route, because if you wait until there's perfect conditions, you may never act. So it's a bit of a balance between the two.
Yep.
To have an idea where you want to go, the idea of the life GPS, right? If you don't put in a destination, you'll drive around the block endlessly. If you don't have a plan of attack, you don't have a GPS guiding you. When you're supposed to turn right, you might end up turning left. Or if you do have a plan, but you don't follow it, again, it says turn right and you turn left, you end up in the bad part of town, someone steals your tires. I mean, things can go bad. So I think you've got to have direction, you've got to have a plan, and sit down and put the focus to it, and you can pretty much achieve whatever you want, physical endeavor, for yourself, an event, for family, finances, lifestyle goals. Having a great partner definitely helps too. I couldn't do anything I do without my wife. I mean, she keeps things moving with 3 kids, a busy lifestyle. They're now into hockey and martial arts and piano and school, and one's walking, and it's busy.
Yeah.
But we take a moment to breathe and figure out, okay, where are we? What is most important? And let's move forward on that.
Very cool. Yeah. In one of my notebooks from the last year, I've got a whole bunch of pages from the Perfect Day Formula, because I've been following Craig since like the early days of turbulence training.
Yes.
And he's a machine for production. Like it's like he's definitely one of those people that's inspiring through just being driven to, I think he goes to bed at like 7 or 8 because he wants to get up at 4 or 5 every morning to have that time before anybody else is awake. Right. And he's able to, knock out a blog post a day or whatever. And his Twitter feed's always very thoughtful and about all these, diligent quotes and inspiration. And he has shifted gears, right? He's got a much bigger business now, essentially, and he's coaching other people in the wellness field and in the productivity field now. So it's been inspiring to see like what and the proof of concept of his perfect day formula has really worked out for him and all the people that he inspires and coaches. So that's really cool.
For sure.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about today?
What did we touch on? So we touched on training and nutrition. I think
we didn't really touch on recovery.
Care of self, conditioning of body. I find that as a chiropractor, I think the fascial system is very interesting, and the fascia being sort of that straitjacket under the skin over the muscle that can tighten with age. It can either work for you or against you. There's a book called Natural Born Heroes, and there's a comment in there, and they talk about Greece and these fighters and parkour and the Second World War, and it's amazing. But there's a comment that is, what if we don't have however many it is, 200 plus muscles in the human body or 600 muscles? What if we have but one? And he's referring to the fascia. When you train your fascia to be efficient.
Yeah.
So Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch, I don't believe is individual muscles working on their own. I think it is a fascial response. He's very rapidly fast. So I wanted to make sure that I had access to space. I don't want to fight against my own body on a daily basis. And I find a lot of people do that when you're not moving mechanically efficient because of restrictions within the skeletal system, where chiropractic can definitely help get you moving. And that's one of the facets I use to help me move well. Mm-hmm. Seeing both my wife, Dr. Stacy, and Dr. Steve from our Quartz Lakes Chiropractic Clinic, I made sure that my nervous system was firing well, but I also went and I saw Josh Martin and Tash, and they were doing massage and fascial release therapy to make sure I had access to space.
Yeah.
So my ability to draw my leg back and propel it forward and rotate the way that I needed to, almost seamlessly aiding the flow of where my mind was, made it work out. And then coming in here to Flow Spot and doing the float therapy to give me time to rest the sort of the aches of the human body from everyday life, and then getting into the cold therapy prior and conditioning my body against not only being uncomfortable, but being able to close in on the mind and control, and also the benefit of cold therapy as far as rapid healing. And I found even after the event, when I came back in the other day and I got right back in, and I found my body likes the cold. It allows it to basically reset and be ready to train again.
Absolutely.
So that combination was brilliant. I had the right gear and equipment, whether it was the right socks that I purchased that allowed non-friction and non-blisters. The orthotics I find are brilliant for me, and luckily I got to create my own as a chiropractor, but building my orthotics to support that weight, that load over 50 kilometers. I mean, it's quite challenging for the human body. And I think not having them, I would be in worse shape than I was. But I finished that day and I felt absolutely phenomenal, from the nutrition, the preparation, to the point where I ran all of our other teammates in. The next day I was feeling great. And this is a year older and a year older and a year older. So it's scary to see what might happen next year when I enter the Masters League, because I'm only going to be better.
Right.
And I'm only going to be faster. And I think it's taking care of the human body is certainly important. So there's the training, there's the nutrition, but don't forget about you. Through whatever facets you can utilize, prepare yourself. And I think what you're capable of can be more readily expressed than if you're fighting not only the endeavor, but your own body's mechanics, because you're not moving efficiently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's true. I think it's why we see, even in sports where people tend to be like stiffer and like strongman and powerlifting, there's a lot more people getting into doing things like animal flow and any yoga, just stretching, different things like that to create that space in your body to be able to withstand when things don't go ideally as well, right? So when we are going for prolonged periods of time, whether under extreme weight or just extreme endurance duress, things don't always. It's great if you can be in perfect, like you're on a train track going straight forward, but things can get a little bit wobbly or whatever, and your body's resilience to that, I think, is majorly impacted by that flexibility, mobility, whatever you want to call it, that having that space. I like that idea of space in the body.
I think it makes life easier to live, because life does get challenging with the age. We all physiologically age, but you're better prepared for those later years if you maintain movement while you can. And it's never too late to start. And I say this as a chiropractor, and patients that I see who discover chiropractic in their 60s and 70s, and I say, my God, man, where were you 20 to 30 years ago? Though I wasn't practicing, this is one of the things you would never dream of, owning a race car, or even an everyday, street car, and never maintaining it. It would fall apart. And why do we wait for the engine light to go on, or for the smoke to be coming out of the engine? Well, we don't with our vehicles. We take care of them in advance. We don't wait for our teeth to be causing us incredible amounts of pain and falling out of our face. We see the dentist. So why is there the disconnect with things like chiropractic and massage? Why don't we take care of the one vehicle that when it breaks down, you don't get to go buy a new one unless you want to start replacing parts? This is the thing that has to last you to 100. And I say that to every patient. And I look at them and I say, you've got 70 years to go. What are you doing to make sure this vehicle is going to get you there? Because life is going to get tough. And if you don't take care of yourself, it's going to be tougher. You're going to fight against yourself before you fight against the world. And energy reserve at the end of the day is no longer there, because you've spent the entire day fighting against inability to move, and you're exhausted. And what a way to live life, to be exhausted every day. So get up and move. And I love, and it was George St. Pierre, and it was Conor McGregor, and I think they brought that animal flow into light, and we really started to see it. And we said, how powerful are these people, and why are they training differently? Why are they doing yoga? Guys don't do yoga.
Right.
Guys do yoga, and I think those who do are much stronger. Powerful, right?
Absolutely.
Elvis Stoico, phenomenal ability and flexibility and movement. Take care of yourself, because days will get tough.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Unless there's anything else you want to cover, but I encourage people. Dr. Sean Francis on Facebook, you do a lot. I think you've got a newsletter and now an audio version of it coming out.
We do.
And you do a lot of live videos, and so definitely worth checking out, and worth checking out Tower Hill Chiropractic if you're in Peterborough. And what's the Kawartha Lakes?
Kawartha Lakes Chiropractic.
Yeah. So all over the place in this area. So thanks for coming on. And anything else you want to mention?
If anybody's interested in joining the Canadian Forces Army Reserve, go hastyp.com. That's the local unit, Peterborough, Belleville, Cobourg. It's a great place to be, and what we do is we build better Canadians. And maybe I'll see you on the Iron Warrior battlefield next year.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks, Dr. Sean.
Thank you.